And as everyone can see as well, obviously super excited to have Molly on, and we'll get in and go through all of her credentials and everything about Molly. But if you want to go ahead and give her a follow, if you're not already, which I'm sure none of you probably are not, but that is her Instagram. Molly did not put up your Twitter. I think it's just Molly Binetti, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. And then obviously, if you guys want to give us a follow over here at DataViz, GPS DataViz, and that's both for Instagram and Twitter. So, like I said, we'll just get started in another minute or two. Give a few last minute stragglers to kind of jump on. I'm actually calling from Molly. I'm up in not in your Midwest, sort of. I'm in Minnesota right now.
What part?
Alexandria. Do you know where that is?
I do. I went to grad school at Minnesota, so
Oh yeah, sure.
Minneapolis was only like an hour and 15 minutes from my hometown in
Yeah.
Wisconsin. So
Oh,
I
okay.
was in Minnesota all the time growing up.
Yeah.
I don't think I've actually ever been to Alexandria though,
Okay.
but I do know
Yeah.
where it is.
It's nice.
Why
On
are
the
you there? I guess this is the time
it,
of year to go if you're gonna go.
for sure. In-laws. So
Ah,
we're up here. Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
that makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not bad
Um,
summertime.
cool. Well, let's go ahead and dive on in for everyone that obviously got a big crew on here. Want to make sure that the target and the goal for today's webinar is to be less than 30 minutes. So I'm certainly excited to have everybody on. There will be some time for Q&A if there are any specific questions at the end. But the purpose of today is to learn a little bit more from Molly Benetti and South Carolina women's basketball. Obviously, a fantastic season, and Molly, obviously, congratulations on a perfect year, and just running the table, which is amazing. But yeah, first off, and most importantly, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Um, let's go ahead and I'll kind of introduce you, Molly, for anyone who may not already know. But I also probably have some questions in here. So obviously, you took over the sport performance in 2019, correct? For
18 actually. 2018.
2018.
Yeah.
Okay, first season was 19 or 18-19 season.
18, 19, yeah.
Correct.
Which
Okay.
a long
Yeah.
time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the numbers, been like sort of okay since you've been there, right? Two
Yeah.
national championships, four SEC championships. And now, as I was looking, correct me if I'm wrong, but also like there was a COVID year in there, which you guys were had one loss at some point as well, and didn't have like the tournament that you could go to, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My second year, 2019, 2020. Yeah, that honestly might have been, I don't know. I mean, this year I think kind of proved wrong, but I think that was our best team as a
Interesting.
whole. Yeah. We finished unanimous number one, but we got to finish the SEC tournament and then COVID happened and canceled
Yep.
everything. So that kind of
Yeah,
sucked.
yeah, yeah. And what I thought was super impressive, right? Like 167 and 9, haven't even experienced 10 losses since you've been there. So it's just flat out amazing. And obviously, kudos to you and to Coach Staley and the rest of the team and what you guys have been able to build there. Want to just give everyone kind of a sense of like who you are and like where you came from a little bit. Obviously, if anyone listened earlier, they heard that you obviously did get a degree from Minnesota, but spent some time at Louisville. I think that what might be interesting for folks to kind of hear is as you moved from Louisville to South Carolina, please correct me if I'm wrong, but like at Louisville, you were not working with women's hoops and then came to do that at South Carolina. Is that right?
Yeah, I assisted with basketball at Louisville
Okay,
during my 4 years there. So I assisted my boss with basketball, and then I
cool.
had three other sports of my own. I guess every stop along the way, I've worked with basketball in some capacity, mostly in a smaller role. And I
Yeah.
knew at some point in my career I wanted to explore the basketball only route, which led me to South Carolina.
So maybe what would be interesting for folks on this call, there's a lot of different people on this call, different backgrounds and where they're at, but I'd kind of love for you, as much as you're willing to share in a brief 30 seconds, is like, as someone who's maybe a Molly Benetti at Louisville that's looking to work basketball only with South Carolina, can you tell us a little bit more about like how that all came to fruition and how you went from Louisville to South Carolina and what that looks like?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. When I was in grad school, I was interviewing for my first job ever. I was interviewing for a job at Purdue, and I was driving down to Coach Hootie had her
Yeah,
Kansas Sports Performance Clinic. And so I was driving down there from Minnesota when I was in grad school, and I didn't know a single soul that was going to be there. I was just riding solo. But the director at Purdue was going to be there, and we were going to kind of talk and have a little, I guess, formal interview while I was down there. But while I was there, I actually met uh, Katie Fowler, who at the time was working women's basketball at Maryland, who would then go
sure.
on and be the women's basketball performance coach at South Carolina. So I met her really early on in my career, and we had stayed connected throughout my time at Louisville. And it was after my third year at Louisville, she actually gave me a call and was like, listen, like I'm going a different direction. Are you interested? Like I can get you an interview. And I had just kind of taken on a new role at Louisville. I'd gotten a raise. My responsibilities were shifting a little bit. I had a really good life in Louisville, and it didn't feel like the right time for me. So I was like, no, like I think I'm good.
Yeah.
Um, and fast forward a year, so I end up staying at Louisville. She actually ends up
Okay.
staying at South Carolina one more year,
Okay.
and a year later calls me and was like, "Listen, I'm done for real this time. I gave coach your number. Answer your phone." I was like, "Okay." So I think it was later that night, got a call from our associate head coach, and then she's like, "Hey, Dawn is going to call you." So Dawn called me later that night, and I think I like stared at my phone for about 30 seconds before actually answering it.
Sure.
But I went through the interview process, and I actually didn't get offered the job
Totally.
initially. They went a different direction. And I guess long story short, uh, that offer ended up being rescinded to that person. And she called me shortly after and offered me the job, and I accepted. So kind of came back in full circle,
Yeah.
after kind of turning it down and then not getting offered and then getting offered. And uh, yeah, I remember her being on the phone with me when I accepted, and she was like, "We're gonna win a national championship together." Like, okay, bet. So,
That's cool.
yeah, here we are, year 7 now, 6 years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Couple national championships under your belt too.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Well, let's dive into your philosophy. I think folks on the call would probably love to hear like what is your philosophy, and there's a lot more that goes into like winning a national championship than just what we're going to talk about today. But I think people would be really interested to hear like what is your approach to athletes, to data, to the relationships. Like, give us a sense for what that looks like.
I think it's really evolved over the course of my career, and I think it really sort of shifted after my first year at South Carolina. Like my first year, I'd been taught so well at Louisville, and like everything we did was so detail oriented and just like locked in, and there's a certain way to do things. And I sort of took that approach and came to South Carolina, and I tried to implement it here, and it just backfired. And what I tried to do was make what I was doing so important and how I wanted it to be done, and tracking and testing and all of these things, and making sure that we were getting better in very specific areas. And we were, but like at the end of the day, it didn't really help us play basketball better. Like we had
Mhm.
by most people's standards, a good year. We made it to the Sweet 16 my very first season. Um, but like my relationships with our players were not where I wanted them to be. Like we were getting better, but it just wasn't didn't feel right to me.
Okay.
So I think over the years I've kind of reevaluated and fine-tuned my approach to really like being less of this is how we do things, and like this is how I want things to be done, to okay, no, like it's a partnership between you and I. Like obviously I'm trying to take our team or help our team get to a certain level, but at the end of the day, like it's my job to make in each individual develop to their highest potential while they're here. And that's not just in the weight room, but as a human as well too. So like let's work together to figure out what it is that you need. What do you need? What do you like? Like how are we going to problem solve together and get you where you need to go? And so um at the foundation of all of that, it's like I have to have really really strong relationships with our players, and not just like the transactional like whatever, but like I spend so much time with our players. I spend more time with them
Sure.
than probably anybody else on our staff. And so in order for us to really make the progress that we need to do, like we've got to be real with one another, and we've got to be able to tell each other the truth. And that doesn't come from just like worrying about what you're doing in the weight room. Like I really get to know these players. I get to know their parents and their families. Um, like I get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so like for us to train every single day, make decisions every single day, keep them healthy, do all the things that we need to do. Like it's got to be a two-way street, and they've got to be able to trust me and respect me, but I've also need to trust and respect them too. And so when you have that strong of a relationship, like you can handle all the all the bad days, you can handle like all the hard conversations, you can make better decisions. And um not every day is like they don't come to South Carolina because they want to lift weights. Like they come to South Carolina because they
Sure.
want to play basketball. So if you keep the main thing, which is I need to keep this player healthy. I need to help them do what they do best out on the court, and I want to help turn them into a pro. Like you got to kind of remove, like I had to remove my ego from it of like how I
Sure.
thought things should be done and what we needed to do, and you really start to just ask yourself, okay, what does this athlete need, and like what is going to help them win games, what is going to help keep them healthy, and what is going to like stay out of the way as much as possible in terms of them being able to express their skill out
Hmm.
on the court. And so I think when you really put like actually put the athlete first, we all say that we do, but in order to truly put the athlete first, like we've got to take our ego out of the equation and find ways to solve problems with that athlete, involve them in the process every single day.
What about with an incoming athlete? Obviously, you can establish like that really good rapport, trust, and authentic over times and travel and all the time you guys spend together. But then someone who comes new into the team, how do you kind of break down those walls and create that trust factor, like seemingly as fast as possible, so that you can obviously get to the goals that you want to achieve?
Yeah. I think, I mean, before we do anything, like I have sit down conversations, in my office with all of them. And just like for me, it's I want to learn as much about them as possible.
Okay.
Um, and I think my old like the old approach and like old school, it's like, right, like they come in as a freshman and you automatically like demand that they respect you and trust you. And that's just not the case anymore. Like you have to earn their trust and their respect. That's just kind of the world that we live in. It's not just an automatic, oh, you're my coach, or you're like this superior figure.
Sure.
Like I'm just gonna fall in line. Like it doesn't always work like that. And not to say we ever have like disrespectful kids in that regard, but like if I'm showing a vested interest in them, it's just like asking questions. And like getting their feedback on stuff. Like it's a lot of trial and error and just like kind of again working together. Like obviously they're gonna do what I have designed and structured for them, but even within that structure, it's a constant conversation and just kind of getting to know them, spending time outside of the weight room too. And that's built over time. It doesn't happen overnight, but I think those daily kind of deposits and daily interactions that you have with your players every single day, beyond just like, okay, what do we have to get done today, go a long way in developing that relationship. And I know that often seems like common sense, but I think sometimes too, when you work in a really like high performance environment, like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to just get results and make sure that we're like checking the boxes of the stuff that we need to do. And sometimes we can kind of lose sight of some of the smaller things that go into actually getting those results.
Speaking of results and like data, this last bullet point, obviously, you kind of talk about like you guys are collecting data for sure. That's a reason why we kind of work together, and we're going to get into that here in just a second. But I think this is a super important point, especially when you said earlier, like keeping the main thing the main thing. So maybe you could educate the audience here on how data plays into your role.
Yeah. I mean, I'll admit I'm probably, along the spectrum of coaches that use technology and data and make decisions. Like I probably fall on the side of the spectrum where like I probably use it the least. And just as of like the last 2 years, really like actually are using technology more. Um, and I think it kind of goes along with what I was saying, just kind of fine tuning my approach to everything and just keeping my focus on what actually matters. I think that we can oftentimes get so in the weeds with collecting data and all of these things. And uh, I don't really think we understand what it all means. And I think sometimes we think things matter more than more than they do in the grand scheme of things, but like being around this environment and just being around very high level sport for a long time, like I like if we had zero technology, we would still be a really good basketball team. If I was replaced by somebody else, they would still win a lot of basketball games and be really good. And so I think like at the end of the day, the success that we have comes down to skill level and the coaching that we have. And yes, we use data. I know obviously our coaches look at basketball analytics, but Coach
Sure.
Staley, she says a lot, like she coaches from intuition and she doesn't rely on those things. We know what analytics make us successful. Same thing for me. Like I collect data, I look at that to help drive some of the programming decisions that I'm making. But as a whole, none of that can replace all of the other things that are a little bit less tangible, a little bit less objective, and you can't really measure it.
Sure. Yeah. And data is only as good as data is applied and actually used at the end of the day. And I think that that's probably where folks who are maybe using technology can have the opportunity to learn from you a little bit. So these are the kind of two main technologies that you're using right now, with obviously DataViz kind of being the third where these connect, right?
Yeah, yeah. So this will be, I guess, year 3 for both of these
Okay.
technologies.
Okay.
This will be
And
year 3
and
with
just so everyone's
Nexon,
aware,
year 3. Yep.
the
What was that?
Vault force plates from Vault.
Yes. Yeah, we do have a force frame with Vol 2. I would say we
Yep.
use sparingly,
Okay.
just because that's something that's shared across our department.
Sure.
It's not just basketball. So
And I think just so other folks who are on the call can understand where DataViz might fit into the puzzle, is obviously a new type of AMS where we are ingesting data, automating reports that come from that data in 60 seconds, and then also offering a mobile experience with that. And so let's dive in, Molly, and talk a little bit more about like the automated reporting part of it and where we kind of interface with, I would say, like, let's start the Connexon, then we'll get into some of the force plate stuff.
yeah.
Maybe walk us through, like, you have finished up practice, and this animation will play over just to give a sense for people, in a few clicks, how you can generate a report. But from finishing practice to like having a GPS DataViz report in your hands, what does that process look like?
Yeah. And I think I'll start even just further back a little bit more big picture. Like
Sure.
for me, like dealing with the data and the reporting and all of that has always been kind of the biggest obstacle for me in terms of one, even wanting to use it in the first place. Like even prior to Connexon, we had Polar Team Pro. And even with then, like the reporting there, like you'd have to go into, export everything into Excel. If you wanted to make
Right.
graphs, you had to do it all manually. And like, I don't have time for that. Um, no, like, and I don't care that much to have to make time for it. So like the thing for me was always like, how can I find a solution that doesn't like, cost me a lot of time or
Yeah.
energy or money? And so yes, from like that was the biggest reason for us to work together, is that everything was done for me. Like I wanted
Sure.
someone to just do the dirty work. So yeah, literally, I mean, honestly, the time consuming part of it is actually getting Connexon to upload. So like getting
Sure.
Connexon
Sure.
to upload, and once that is uploaded from a GPS standpoint, now okay, now it's 2 clicks, upload
Yeah.
it from that day, and then you have a report literally in maybe 30 seconds. I think it's actually like 3 clicks
Yeah.
total.
3 clicks, 30
Um,
seconds.
right. And
I
so
always
like
say
prior
60 just to
prior
give
to the
ourselves a
yeah,
little bit of cushion through like different servers that might take us a little bit of time to work through.
yeah, I think like our internet in our gym is probably the biggest roadblock to some of the time.
Sure.
But prior to this, like I had an intern this past season. I typically don't have interns, so it was like just me too. So if like
Sure.
it was a matter of it happening or not, like it probably wasn't going to happen because I just didn't have the capacity or the bandwidth.
Yeah.
So I had somebody that would kind of be in charge of all of the technology and the data for me. So this simplified, and she was making reports and graphs and all of that manually in Excel, and just we'd upload it and update it on Google Drive every day.
Yeah.
Um, so this saved
That
time.
saves
This
a
is
lot of
something
time.
easily, like you said, you can spread out to athletic trainer, dietitian. I mean, if you want to share with your coaches, whoever you want to share it with can get an email in a matter of seconds. Like Coach Staley doesn't want to see any reports. Our coaching
Sure.
staff doesn't want to see any reports. Like if there's something that's alarming or something off or whatever, something needs to be addressed, she's always open to it. But she's got enough to worry about. Like she doesn't need another report like on her desk or in her
Yeah.
inbox every day. So it's really just me, my intern, and then we'd send out reports to our athletic trainer as well too.
PT. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and speaking of that, we pulled one up just so folks can see, like, hey, you get back, you pull your Connects on data in 30 seconds, what shows up in your inbox. And so I'll kind of high level overview. And then Molly, if you have any specifics that you look at of the report, the idea here is that like tables, charts, and graphs are all important. But the insights that come from the data are what help us make decisions. And so what GPS DataViz tries to bring to the house is give you a difficulty of how difficult today's session was, where you're at in your periodization, if there's a game day coming up, ultimately how today's session on an intensity scale might have compared to yesterday or the day before. So as you guys are kind of moving throughout the week, understanding ultimately how today trended. And then give you a relative day. If it's match day -1, obviously we have a game versus Auburn tomorrow. How did it compare to our last 2 game day -1s? And then if players worked harder than the group, if players have not hit 90% of their top speed, now I will say for everyone on the call, this does vary depending on the technology you have, right? If you have top speeds, obviously we can analyze that and show players that haven't hit top speed in a while. Another part is over or underworked. And so I'll just kind of address this so folks know what goes into this. There is no single formula that could ever predict injuries or tell you, hey, this player is like truthfully way overworked. But what we do is we do an acute to chronic. And if an athlete is above or below certain metrics over certain days, so there's repetitive behavior, they will end up on this flag report. And the whole purpose is to flag for Molly to take a look, see this, and be like, oh, yes, I know Camilla is saying underworked because she took 2 weeks off to go to Brazil. So like that's stuff that like, yes, I'm not worried about her. She's going to flag as underworked or overworked, and that's totally fine. Anything else that you look at on like kind of this report that stands out? I know you talked like kind of game day. I have a game slide here coming up here as well, but love to kind of hear if you have any specifics that you look at on this.
Yeah, I think this is really helpful. Like you said, like sometimes you just don't even have time to really dig into like the actual report itself and like
Sure,
look
sure.
at what that looks like. So to have something that's just a quick overview. And then if you see something that's off, then it's just a quick, okay, let me look into that further
Sure.
and figure out why. Or it's something that pops up that you already kind of know is going to happen anyways because of whatever circumstance,
Yep.
that player has been going through. So I think this is a helpful tool from just a quick glance of like, okay, like yes, this makes sense, or like something sticks out, like no, like that's odd or that's interesting. Like let me figure out why or like what this actually looks like.
Speaking of that, yeah, if you did want to look at the report, the attachment is right there in the email, which you can open up. And the idea that we've designed the report is built by coaches to give you a glimpse. A lot of coaches who do look at this, head coach might look at this cover page. I know Don's not someone who's really inundated with the data, but this is ideally giving back to the program to say, like, how did today compare across our key metrics and comparative to our game baselines? We're honestly at our end, we're analyzing your data at a game value to be able to share that back, but then to show things like a breakdown across the entirety of the team, color coordinated, green, yellow, and red. And I think that's very simplistic in nature because coaches understand that concept. Being able to give you an overview of all of your practice drills and where did our load come from today, whether that was in a wing to wing or a fits or just shot drill, whatever that might look like, and being able to individualize it to the actual players, right? Like their baselines and how they achieved. Obviously, we can see a lot of players in this concept were kind of in the 30 to 50% range, and if that's what we're targeting, like that's awesome. That's where we're at. And then being able to give some sort of indication of how today's session in context compared to the last couple of weeks, providing that at a team level and then broken down to individuals. And then if athletes are certainly overworked or underworked, attaching those charts. So I think just to further Molly's point, on the days in which you have time, not only do the insights happen in 30 seconds, this entire report gets built in 30 seconds to help drive efficiency And I think what I said earlier, like keep the main thing, where you can keep coaching and not have to spend time building all this.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Cool. Let's maybe give the folks transition a little bit here while we're kind of coming up on time, a little bit of indication on your philosophy around force plates, and what you're really looking for. Obviously, our platform, we can visualize all the data, but maybe just kind of start at a high level, what you're looking for when it comes to force plates.
Yeah, so that's something that we've sort of integrated into just a normal part of our training, specifically in season. Obviously, we're going to look at things throughout the course of the off season, but in season, we still try to jump twice a
Well,
week on the
okay.
plates as well too. Um, to me, like it always just sort of reinforces what you already know to be true about how they're feeling, and then also what you're seeing with your eyes, whether it's in practice during games or just like what you know about life in that moment, like the academic stress or it's finals or it's nearing the end of the regular season and everybody's just like struggling to survive. Like it just sort of reinforces those things. And similar to the concept with the Connexon metrics and things like that, like there's always going to be certain ones that you look at, and then if things are kind of jumping off the page one way or the other, like trying to figure out, okay, like why, whether that's good or that's bad. I think for me, the probably if I had to pick one metric from our force plates, it would be the RSI modified. So
Hmm.
looking at how high they jump and how fast they jump.
Yeah,
I know there's a lot of research around that in regards to fatigue and using that as a monitoring tool in
sure.
season. Obviously that's if I had to just pick one, it would be that from
Cool.
a all year round standpoint. And um, I think like being able to break down different phases of the jump too, being able to look at something from the eccentric phase,
Sure.
obviously concentric impulse. We look at kind of all three phases of the jump. If there's something that's I use that information mostly from a training standpoint throughout the course of the year and really trying to figure out what qualities we need to target more. Um, but I love, again, like the Vault Hub, like does its own reports and things like that. But to be honest, like I found that a little bit time consuming at times too, and a little bit from a visual standpoint, I've liked how these reports, again, just give you a quick snapshot, a quick okay, did it go up? Did it go down? Did it stay the same? Like, what is the
Sure.
percent change? Like, is it even something to be concerned with? Or is like this player like severely, you know, decrease in a certain metric? And like, okay, if so, like why? Like, okay, are they not loading today? Like what's going
Right.
on? Oh, my knee's bugging me. Okay, like let's figure that out. So again, just a quick snapshot of the team as a whole, and then you can break it down. It shows individuals. You can show it in context, within the last couple of weeks as well too. But again,
I think
makes
what
it
we're trying to do on our end is like give you that streamlined view of the data where yes, you can go through and pick any type of, there's hundreds of data points you could pick from, but more being able to isolate what those key ones are. Maybe it's like looking at asymmetries, which you could flip and look at like the, eccentric braking impulse left and right and things like that, where you'd be able to see the relationship and the asymmetry value between those. And then ultimately, hitting get report. And what Molly was speaking about is that that comes directly into her email inbox. It breaks down the session, and then she gets a report that gives her who the top performers are, new PRs, athletes that might be flagged. Flagging here happens more off of standard deviation, which is really relative to that athlete and what they have been going through. And so, like that anecdotal stuff that you might know, obviously paired with some of this, and where it becomes really powerful is now putting that with your connects on GPS and this to be able to see at a team or certainly down to an individual level, potentially where someone might be showing some sort of signs of fatigue that you can then obviously have that really good, truthful one-on-one conversation with that athlete around.
Yeah, I think my favorite aspect of that, like I like the rankings of the top performers, like they're all super
Yeah,
competitive, so they like
good.
to see that. And then like you said, like what is actually like a meaningful change? So being able to flag something that is, greater than two standard deviations and like knowing,
Yeah.
okay, like that's an actual change that we probably should take a look at, I think is really helpful.
Yep. Speaking of like competitiveness, now you don't get the number one team in the nation that goes undefeated without some competitiveness. Um, Obviously, within the platform, there's different elements that you can look at. One of the things that we kind of talked about, something you look at is yes, the calendar, which shows you all of your days, kind of color coordinated out. but we also talked about the concept of leaderboards. So within our platform, Molly has the ability to go in and pick any one of those metrics. Could be a combination of top speed or accumulated acceleration load and MRSI mod. Like she can do all of that and then generate leaderboards. Molly, can you maybe share a little bit on a case by case basis where you maybe use something like this?
Yeah, we like to do leaderboards really anytime that we jump, but I'd say probably like preseason in particular. So, from when we start school leading up to our first official practice, like that whole kind of 6 week period, we do like every day and every week, like constant kind of competitive. There's testing involved, there's different assessments and things like that. So they've got a chance to perform and earn points for themselves to win an award, essentially.
Okay.
So like we track certain things like every week throughout the course of the off season. And so like when it comes to our counter movement jumps or whatever it
Yep.
is, like putting them in rankings and they get points based off how they're ranked. So we use it in that
Nice.
sense too. And so I'll update that daily. I'll update that weekly, and so they can see exactly where they stand in comparison to one another. And nothing, I think, drives intent and engagement, especially for a group like, and it's fun too. Like
For
that's, I
sure.
think, the biggest thing too is trying to make that environment something that's a lot of fun. Because again, like if they had a choice, they wouldn't be in the weight room as much as they are
Sure.
with me. So
Yeah.
yeah, we love those, and it's super easy to use.
Cool. Cool. Well, we're nearly wrapping our time. I think that there's two parts here. One part for everyone that's on the webinar, I do want to share something that's brand new coming down from GPS DataViz, and then we're going to open up to Q&As. So it should be on your screen. There's a little Q&A box that you can type in. We've got our team monitoring that. We'll make sure to pop that up as a question for Molly if you do have that. So you can go ahead and do that now. But one thing I did want to show is a new integration of like Chat GPT AI for performance data, where coaches can come in and ask things about really any question that might come up, like who are the fastest players in 2024, or what was the hardest drill, what was our hardest game, our hardest practice, to compare this period to a different period. There's so many questions that we get as coaches about what might be happening, and it could come from a head coach, from an athletic trainer, from a different performance coach. And the idea is that rather than opening up 4 different systems or having to dig through to look at that, essentially you just open up DataViz AI that then you ask the question and engage and talk with your data. So if obviously you have any questions around that, and Molly, I know you don't have this yet. This is something that's literally in alpha right now as we are testing out, but something that we're releasing a little bit later this year as an opportunity for people to get better understanding from their data sets. So with that being said, if there are any questions, please drop those into the chat. Who picks the report specifics, DataViz or the coach?
The coach, that was one
Coach.
thing from the beginning that, we've worked together on. It's whatever I wanted it to look like. Those were the metrics that they could put in those reports. So, from Connexon and from ForceDex, like I told them exactly what it is that I cared about and what metrics we wanted to look at, and they customized those reports for me. I didn't have to do that myself.
Yeah, for us, it's always part of the conversations to understand because we work with a lot of different programs that look at a lot of different things, and so not obviously making it so that Molly has to do something that someone else is doing, but it's really well in line with not only what she's used to seeing, but streamline that process as quickly and easy as possible.
I know we had several conversations, especially in the beginning, of like, hey, well, like, what do you want this to look like? Like, what do we need to change? Like this,
Sure.
that, and whatever. And so I think that's a huge part of it too. And like working with a company that is willing to listen and make those adjustments and like, oh, like I haven't thought about this, but like let me figure it out or whatever it is, or retroactively go back and do something. So I think that's a huge piece, is just that being able to customize it to make it exactly what you want, which is what it should be.
For sure. Now, some of the flagging mechanisms that are in place are based around the data points that you want, but for us and what we've seen, just ultimately like a really easy way for us to flag an athlete that's over or underworked or that, might be a standard deviation or two away. That's what we're trying to do, is take the data points that coaches are looking at and be able to like instantly provide the feedback for a coach on that. So I think our whole goal is let the coaches coach, let us run the data, and then ultimately streamline that as quickly as possible. Yeah. If there are any other questions, yeah, so we got one here, one more. What are your key variables from Connexon?
Yeah, so biggest things we look at, I look at just total mechanical load.
Okay,
We'll break that down too and look at acceleration load and deceleration load. I think that especially like the deceleration load is something that I'm trying to dive into a lot more. I look at top speed, but I also take that with a grain of salt with Connexon and basketball. Like it's just
sure.
um, a little bit uh, still up in the air for me in terms of how much I value that. We will look at total distance. Um, I know I'm missing.
Hold on, let me go back. This might jog your memory. We'll pull,
I
might as
look
well.
at load per minute as well
Oh,
too.
sure. Yep.
Load per minute. I think those are really the main ones. I think
We
for
do have
me,
jumps in there. Do you look at
yeah,
jumps much? A little bit?
yeah, I look at the jumps, but I wouldn't say I do anything. And to be honest, like for me, this is just a tool that I use for my own education. I'm fortunate, and I know I'm fortunate to work with a coach that gets it and doesn't
Yeah.
destroy my players in practice for 3 hours, and like where I have to really worry about uh load issues and things like that. So um for me, it's just always trying to understand individual players. Like I know our point guards and like Raven Johnson like is always going to have the highest load out of anybody. Our point guards are always going to be the highest load, and it's not even because they're inefficient. It's just like the way that they play. But I also so I
Sure.
know I need to prepare our guards probably more than anyone to be extremely durable.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just try to look at it. What is each individual actually being demanded to do on the court? And then like, what does it all look like for our team, like throughout courses of the season, specific date, once we get in season, what does Tuesday look like? Wednesday, obviously we play
Yeah.
typically Sunday, Thursday, like what just for my own education, because my approach has always been like, I'm not going to tell Coach Staley what like they're gonna have to do like she needs them to do whatever they need to do basketball wise, and then I'm gonna figure out how I can do my job better to make sure that they're prepared and recovered from that. Fortunately, it's never like I never have to piece anyone back
Well, I have
together.
to say it is quite impressive. If we just look at the block of February, game day -1 was 36%, 38%, 38%, 38%, 38%, 36, 43, 43, like pretty dang dialed as far as what that game day -1 looked like on the regular basis there. So definitely hats off to you
We
and,
are
and the coach.
consistent. Yeah, we are
Sure.
consistent.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously seeing what that game day +1 looks like, super important too. So, great to see that. Yeah, cool, awesome, Molly. Thank you so much for joining. Obviously, if anyone else has any specific questions, I will stay on for a little bit longer, but certainly appreciate it. If you do want the recording of this webinar, please feel free to drop us a line. We'll be happy to send that along. But again, Molly, thank you so much for taking the time out to share a little bit more about your program, your philosophy, and ultimately how DataViz was a little piece to helping you guys out this year.
Well, thank you for having me. Same thing. I'm available too for any questions or follow-ups. Please feel free to reach out. But appreciate you, Jacob, and working with you guys.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Okay, I have stopped my screen share, but I think they're still
Yeah,
on.
another question popped through. Oh
Uh,
yeah.
DataViz work with Catapult. Yes, Kevin. DataViz does work with Catapult. Yeah. Funny story. We were actually founded from Catapult at a university that was using a combination of Catapult and FirstBeat. So yeah, we work with Catapult. Catapult has a few different versions. Connexon has an API. Certain products within Catapult also have an API, or they could do a CSV upload. We work with both of those sets, but absolutely, definitely work with Catapult. Yeah. All right, I'm going to stop the